Throughout the 80s, the WWF was one of the biggest things in pop culture. Thanks to stars like Macho Man Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant, and Hulk Hogan, stars that it's crazy to say are no longer with us. Not necessarily because I grew up watching them wrestle, but because they made some of the most memorable cameos in things that I watched.
We'll try and kill each other like civilized people.
Can kill you now.
Hey, Freak Show! You're going nowhere! Yeah, 100s on the table, 20s on the floor.
Due to the promotion of these stars, the WWF would rake in millions each year off merchandise alone. And alongside that, every show they put on would seemingly be bigger than the last. However, things would dramatically change come the turn of the decade. Throughout the 80s, some of the biggest stars that you'd see on television and in movies were these jacked, larger-than-life guys, more often than not pushing their 40s, with mostly unobtainable physiques. Pretty much like now. And much like now, this became a body standard for not only Hollywood stars, but also athletes as well. This, alongside more research being done, as well as some negative media portrayal, led the government to step in.
Today, it gives me great pleasure to sign legislation that reflects the total commitment of the American people and their government to fight the evil of drugs.
The Anabolic Steroid Control Act of 1990 was established to pretty much piggyback off of the 1988 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. However, this time around, the act established penalties for trainers and advisors who encourage or induce individuals to use steroids illegally. And that is where WWF ran into a huge problem. WWF Dr. George Zahorian would set up shop every TV taping and distribute, well, pretty much anything that was asked of him. And whatever he didn't have readily available, he would ship to the stars. With these new laws in place, the block was incredibly hot, leading to the FBI targeting strength and conditioning coach Bill Dunn, who would quickly give up his supplier being WWF's Dr. Zahorian. The FBI would conduct their investigation by seizing and searching every package that Dr. Zahorian would send out, leading to insurmountable evidence being placed against him. And this was a huge story at the time. In fact, it was so huge that the FBI couldn't even keep the private investigation private. Weeks before the news got to break the story, someone within the investigation would end up telling a colleague about it. And that colleague also just so happened to have ties with the WWF, leading to the details of the investigation ending up on the desk of none other than Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon, who then demands that the WWF sever all ties with Dr. Zahorian, which they did. Kinda. Though the doctor wasn't showing up to each taping, he was still the go-to guy when the wrestlers needed anything medical related. And he would fulfill the orders via, you guessed it, FedEx. All while still being unaware that the FBI is intercepting his packages and photographing them for evidence. And this is where Hulk Hogan would get caught in the crossfires, as he just so happened to be the recipient of several packages from Dr. Zahorian. And once the news finally broke, there was a huge storm of media surrounding the WWF.
With one of the most prominent accusations being that a number of them use steroids. The latest to be accused has been Hulk Hogan in a trial over a doctor's distribution of steroids.
In order to avoid the bad publicity, WWF's long-standing attorney Jerry McDevitt would end up getting Hulk Hogan excused from testifying, which was and still is a pretty rare feat. He was successful due to the fact that Hulk Hogan also went to Zahorian for legitimate medical reasons, as he and his wife were having trouble conceiving at the time, and testifying would compromise his medical privacy rights. The jury would find Dr. Zahorian guilty for selling steroids to wrestlers who weren't his patients. The doctor would seemingly take the fall for all of this, but not before getting an and one at the buzzard. On the last day of the trial, Dr. Zahorian's lawyer made an official statement claiming that both Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan purchased steroids from the doctor. And this caused a major ripple effect for the WWF, completely shattering the image of the company. This led to Vince announcing the WWF's new steroid policy, a policy that we've seen evolve over the years to become one of the most strict wellness policies an organization can have. The same night as Vince's announcement, Hulk Hogan would make an appearance on the Arsenio Hall show. And on the show, he would admit to taking steroids up to 3 times in his career after suffering from significant injuries.
3 different occasions I had the same type muscle injuries. That is the extent of Hulk Hogan's steroid use.
And the public scrutiny from all of this led to criticisms that WWE still face to this day. Like, seriously, I've spoken to people outside of the loop of wrestling, and a lot of them still think that they're all on steroids. Meanwhile, the WWF parts ways with Hulk Hogan. Apparently his appearance on the Arsenio Hall show left Vince McMahon pretty upset about the whole thing, and I can understand why. This led a lot of people to believe that Hulk Hogan was lying about the whole thing, and to the public eye it felt like he was hiding something. I'll give his appearance 1 out of 5 Arsenios, mostly because he showed up. In the midst of the storm, Vince decides to give WWF a bit of a rebrand, and decides to go with smaller, more athletic guys, leading to the rise of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. However, combining change along with the backlash they were facing from the initial lawsuit led to a huge ratings drop in WWE. And despite all of these changes made by Vince McMahon and the WWF, it seems to have been too little too late. In November of 1993, Vince McMahon and the WWF were indicted on charges of conspiracy and distributing steroids to the locker room. And if found guilty, Vince was looking at up to 11 years in prison and a $1.5 million fine. Both things that the company absolutely could not afford at the time. Vince, being chairman and head of creative of the WWF, made him a pretty intricate part of the company's survival, especially with the rise of WCW, who was starting to gain a lot of popularity due to its own homemade stars, as well as the benefit of having some former WWF stars as well. If found guilty, the WWF could cease to exist. Now, the trial was a complete circus. With the amount of news coverage, fans attending, alongside WWF's detractors, the whole thing played out like an episode of Raw. And as if things couldn't get even more dramatic, Vince McMahon shows up in a neck brace, and this is where we get the iconic visual. Now, if you ask almost anyone, they'd tell you Vince was doing this for sympathy. However, his lawyer claims that Vince had scheduled a neck surgery 2 weeks before the trial, as he knew he wasn't going to be on television and he didn't want to be on television with a neck brace, even though he was on television with a neck brace. Many former WWF employees would take the stand, and for the most part, they all confessed to being on steroids prior to joining the WWF. Well, except for Nails.
You're in my prison now!
See, Nails went in there with a clear agenda to put Vince behind bars. Nails is a former wrestler for the WWF, who seemed to be on the verge of a pretty decent mid-card push, but was then quickly released after an altercation with Vince McMahon. The dispute began over a financial issue, and it would end with Nails allegedly trying to strangle Vince McMahon. He would testify in court stating that Vince McMahon forced him to take steroids, but after revealing he didn't know what the word agenda meant, as well as Vince McMahon's lawyer pointing out the fact that his ring gear doesn't show off his physique, as well as Nails admitting that he hated Vince McMahon, he lost a significant amount of credibility. The trial began to completely unfold. The testimonies were falling through, and McMahon and the WWE were indicted in New Jersey instead of Stamford, Connecticut, where most of the transactions occurred, leading a lot of the evidence to fall flat. It was looking like Vince McMahon might get away with this unscathed, but they were waiting on one more testimony. Okay. The one person that could put an end to all of this was Hulk Hogan, a man who hasn't spoken to Vince since the last steroid trial, and who was also known for never putting anyone over. Hogan was brought in to testify in exchange for immunity, meaning he wouldn't be charged with any of the crimes involved in this case. And the expectation was that Hulk Hogan was pretty much going to bury Vince. And with the whole world watching, anticipating the fate of the WWF, in Hogan's own words, he told the truth. He made the official statement claiming that he and Vince were gym friends, and from time to time, they would share connects on steroids. You know, just gym bro shit, bruh. I feel like they did this every single day.
You son of a bitch.
Anyway, McMahon would be found not guilty and continue to run his day-to-day duties at the WWF, whereas Hulk Hogan would, depending on who you ask, go on to run WCW into the ground. After a neck-and-neck Monday Night War, creating some of the greatest factions and superstars of all time, and giving us the birth of the Attitude Era, come the turn of the millennium, the Monday Night Wars would officially end once Vince McMahon would go on and buy WCW. Eventually, Hulk Hogan would make his return to the WWE in a run that left a lot to be desired, the best of it being his match against The Rock at WrestleMania. He would even have an on-screen feud with Vince McMahon, concluding in a match at WrestleMania. Since this, over the years, we've seen mass suspensions due to superstars violating the health and wellness policy. We've even seen it brought into questions during the discussion of the Chris Benoit tragedy. It's seemingly a blemish that WWE won't ever really escape. And as for Hogan, he ended up doing something else that tarnished his legacy.
100's on the table, 20's on the floor.